this part of the presentation, I'll start by saying something that Putin is alluding to in the interview with Oliver Stone. Those are 4-hour interviews. I haven't watched it all. I saw part of the last one. And Putin also just did a 4-hour marathon question and answer, 70 questions. I haven't really.
4.5 hours.
4.5 hours. So he's very active. And what he said, I have to reference. And it's a very sobering thing that he said. It's not a nice thing he said, it's a very sobering thing. It's a very honest thing. And that is that he has been the leader of Russia through 4 presidents. And he says that essentially that regardless of the president, the policies have remained the same. And then he referenced the fact that he and Bush were talking, and he told Bush that the United States was supporting the terrorists in Chechnya. And Bush didn't know this. And Bush was upset, and Bush said, I'll look into it. And then a little bit later on, he got a message from the CIA that they are indeed supporting Chechen terrorists, and they will continue to support Chechen terrorists. So it didn't matter what Bush, his friend, George Bush Jr., thought. The policy continued no matter what. Now, this is a very important point to make. It's a very sobering point. You have an elected president, and to a large degree, a lot of these policies are continuing despite the evidence that's being shown that this president is not necessarily in agreement with those policies. Now, so what Putin is alluding to is that Russia has no intention of intervening into U.S. politics. But in a sense, Putin's honesty is a form of an intervention, but not some kind of manipulation like the United States did in Ukraine or these other places. That's not what Russia's doing. The president of Russia isn't doing that. The president of Russia is being forthcoming, and instead. So what you have is an internal fight going on in the U.S. that has yet to sort itself out. And that's the way Putin is describing it. So there's this ongoing internal battle going on inside the United States that has yet to be sorted out. And while he hopes for the best, and he hopes that when he meets with Trump on July, in about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, in Hamburg on the sidelines of the Group of 20 meeting, he hopes that it will be okay, that they will get to know each other. He's also very aware that the Trump administration is not consolidated. The Trump administration cannot guarantee a policy at this point. They cannot guarantee a direction. They may try to go in a certain direction, but they cannot guarantee that direction at this point. Now, however, if you step back and look at the propaganda attack on Trump and the ratcheting up of that propaganda attack to actual violent representations in the media, the gearing up of this violence among people who have a deep rage, which is being transferred onto so-called white male, whatever, or being transferred onto the Republicans, or being transferred onto to Trump. This is creating a climate for assassinations. So, this similar type of propaganda was going on against Abraham Lincoln from the British press and the British element in the U.S. that was at that time they had some media in the US that was doing the same thing. And that preceded the Lincoln assassination. And you had a similar violent propaganda being unleashed through leftist and anarchist circles in the United States that were run by the British to create the environment for an anarchist to come from Europe and assassinate McKinley. And he slept with the leading British operative in New York, Emma Goldman, before he went and did the assassination. And this is after Emma Goldman publicly called for McKinley's assassination. So you're dealing with a situation where this is the kind of atmosphere and that's being created as part of, not the only thing, as part of other operations which are being run to eliminate the President of the United States. And that elimination is what Putin is very aware of, and I'm very aware of, is a very real possibility. So I'm not here to bring you the good news that everything is hunky-dory, but I am here to tell you that there's a fight going on, and it's getting very intense inside the United States. Now, our movement has been pretty much on the sidelines. Our movement has been pretty much hoping that Trump is an opportunity. Our movement did not support Donald Trump for president. Our movement, however, is hoping, has been hoping. But now we've come to a point where whatever the deficiencies exist in Donald Trump, they're secondary to stopping the coup against Donald Trump. So our movement is now shifting its operations to an open, direct move to stop the coup in the United States. Now, regrettably, there is no other group that can effectively mobilize the population of the United States, because a lot of the people who are mobilizing the people against that for the Trumps, they don't have, they're doing it for other reasons. They're either because they're anti-liberal, or they're anti-this, or they're anti-that, or they're anti-Hillary, or they're anti-queer, or they're anti-black, or whatever the particular issues. And we're the ones that can go out there and say, if you do not, we must stop the coup against the president, because if you don't, we're going to have war with Russia and China. Nobody else is saying that. Nobody else is really equipped to say that in a way. So we are now going out to those areas with that message. Stop the coup. Okay, now we have had a lot of experience with the apparatus which has been running the coup on the inside. It was the same apparatus that ran the operation to put us, the LaRouche movement, shut us down and put a lot of our members in prison. It's the same apparatus, the same people. Robert Mueller was a key player in putting our people in jail.
Where did that happen? The late 80s?
It started in the middle 80s. LaRouche went to jail in 89. Other people went to jail in the 90s. And this was a war, and we fought this war. But the point is to say it's the same apparatus. And this apparatus is activated whenever there is a political element emerged, which has a Franklin Delano Roosevelt aspect to it, of bringing different elements of the society together around a common policy. That is when they activated it. They activated it around Clinton at a certain point. They activated it around Ronald Reagan at a certain point. They activated it to kill Kennedy. This apparatus is the thing that Putin is alluding to when he says the policies are the same. He said the bureaucracy is ruling. And this is what he's being very polite. This is what he's referring to. It's the bureaucracy, but it's not really, that's not a very good term for it. Some people call it the deep state. I don't know if that's a very good term for it, but this is what we are up against.
Excuse me, Paul, is this group also investigating 9/11?
This is the group
Perpetrated it.
that perpetrated 9/11.
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Yes, this is the same, and protected the assets that they used to perpetrate it. Now, in this context, you have to understand the existential nature of the collapse that's now taking place of the British system of the empire. And you have the One Belt, One Road, which we've been talking about. This is transforming the world. People are coming back from that conference who were against the One Belt, One Road in the United States, and they're now talking all about it. This is the greatest thing we've ever seen. One of these people is a former Prime Minister of Australia who now has a group in New York. It's paid for by the Rockefellers. They've been very negative. His name is Rudd. He was a former Prime Minister. And now he was at the One Belt, One Road conference. He came back and all of a sudden, whoa, this is the greatest thing you've ever seen. And we've been intervening on these people in the past, and now they're completely turned around. So this is having a great effect. So this is taking over. Secondarily, also with that, you have the reality that of having a real leader of Russia. That reality is that nuclear war is not a winnable. Putin has made it very Putin has not been asleep on the military aspect. And what the Russians have demonstrated in Syria is that you can defeat this terror. Or at least you can potentially defeat this terror. And they've also demonstrated in Ukraine that they did not get drawn in. In both Syria and Ukraine, the Russians have demonstrated that they can maintain a viable position with the minimum of force. With the minimum of force. This is very important. And the tactics they're using in Ukraine and the tactics they're using in Syria, I'm not saying they're the same, but they involve the minimum amount of military force to create the maximum effect, rather than going in and just causing a mess. In that context, what is happening to Europe with respect to this crisis, the One Belt, One Road, the economic problems that Europe is having, the refugee problems that Europe is having, what's happening is now reaching a critical point. And what's happened in the U.S. Senate was something totally insane. The U.S. Senate has voted something like 91-8 or something like that. Yeah?
98-2.
Okay, 98-2 or something like that. They voted, this has to go through the House, they voted a bill that would not only expand sanctions on Russia, but also target the countries trading in that are importing natural gas from Russia in Europe for sanctions. And none of this can be reversed by the president without congressional authority. Of course, this is insane. And even the most pro-Obama government of Angela Merkel has now realized that this is existential to Germany. this insanity in the United States is now threatening Germany. And the foreign minister of Germany has issued a letter backed by Merkel asking the U.S. not to do this to Germany.
And Austria.
In Austria, yeah. So this is very significant. But this is how much the collapse is taking place. Now,
actually, they also tied, tied the sanctions with Iran as well.
the Germans.
So, no, I mean, US center, they tied Iran into these sanctions. Basically saying that Russia is supporting Iran, and so until the sanctions will be off on Iran, or they will maybe, they plan to start the war.
Well, they connect the Iranian situation with the bill. Okay,
Yes.
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Because I heard Iran.
Bill. They tacked, it was an anti-Iranian bill, and they tacked on a whole pile of anti-Russian sanctions.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
So it's an anti-Iranian, so they did this. This is totally insane.
It's, what it means, it will never come off until they will accept that Iran is, or there is a change of government in Iran, or they will accept Iran is, is a
This is insane.
Yes.
This is completely insane. So they're basically they're actually going to have it's going to have a boomerang effect the other way, because you can't. People have to live. People have to have oil. People have to have natural gas. Especially Germany now that they shut down their nuclear and they're not
Trying
you know.
They haven't done it yet.
No, well they're trying to. Yeah, this is totally insane. So this is a sign of collapse, not a sign of strength.
That's right.
Now you have the offshore financial system, the global, being challenged by China's state credit. China is financing everything with banks which are state-owned banks. They're not going through the private capital markets for their activity. This is a revolution. This is a revolution because up until China started doing this on a mass scale, maybe some other countries were able to do it somewhat. But this is a revolution. They're not going through the capital markets, the private capital speculative markets for the capital to do anything. This is going against the very core aspect of the empire, which is based on an offshore financial system. Why offshore? Because you can take your money out of your country and go offshore and avoid taxes. 1, 2, you get a higher return. 3, the money can be used to speculate with. Now who governs this offshore system? Who is the biggest sovereign of the offshore system? It's the monarchy of Great Britain, and probably some of the other little monarchies in Europe. So, now who is proposing to end the offshore system?
Jeremy Corbyn.
There you go. Who said that? There you go.
Yes.
Jeremy Corbyn. And what happened in Great Britain? Well, you know what happened in Great Britain. Corbyn has picked up the desire to end the many decades of depraved economic plundering of the British population that expanded when Margaret Thatcher deregulated everything and gave the world mad cow disease. By the way, she did cause mad cow disease. I don't know if people know this.
I think she had mad
Yeah. Oh, I thought she had
I thought
it.
she was, but-
Yes, she had it. It's contagious.
She caused mad cow disease because she gave she let them feed the scrapie
Bovine spongiform
the sheep
encephalopathy.
with the disease to the cows, and that's how the cows got it.
Protein supplement.
Yeah, protein supplements. So anyhow, this mad cow disease problem then became the mad Blair disease problem, And then it took off from there. So what's happening is the British population, especially the younger people, are going against this. So this is very big. This is huge. And Theresa May is in deep trouble, and elections may be called, and it could very well be an end to those policies. With Jeremy Corbyn coming in and coming down hard on the international financial, on the City of London, on the offshore system, and he's proposing infrastructure but not by going to the private capital markets, but by going directly with government money, direct creation of money. So this is, and he is known to be absolutely an adamant supporter of Glass-Steagall equivalent, and unlike other people, he has been waiting in the wings for decades. He's been patiently waiting in the wings for decades.
And he also spoke openly what is why we have there is refugees and why we have mess in Middle East.
Yeah.
He openly spoke about.
So this is very significant. So this is another sign of a breakdown of the financial system.
Also, the alliance, the DUP, these guys are the most anti-liberal reactionary assholes that ever walked the face of the earth. Democratic Unionist Party in Ulster.
Yeah.
They're going to try and make it a coalition with these guys. They're anti-gay, they're anti-liberal.
But also,
So,
what is his name? The other Irish.
Sherry Adams.
Yeah.
Sherry Adams.
He's very much against this coalition, and he already went.
should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going to take their seats in Parliament. They're adamant about that.
Yeah. They're already making lots of noise.
They should go ahead.
So everywhere in the world, this thing is disintegrating. And a new system, a system that began to be expressed in the late 70s by Mr. Lyndon LaRouche, is now getting traction with the One Belt One Road and beyond. And it was, and when Helga was in China, there was a tremendous desire to have LaRouche's economic writings translated for the Chinese, for China. But the most powerful stronghold of the empire is not Canada anymore. It's not Great Britain anymore. It's the apparatus inside the United States. This apparatus has to be crushed if humanity is going to survive. And that is our mission at this point, is to now go all out to crush this apparatus. This apparatus got fully entrenched following the McKinley assassination, and it was not eliminated by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They ran a coup against his chosen successor, Henry Wallace. You have the Kennedy assassination. You have the effort of people under Reagan to break this apparatus, and he was shot and incapacitated for quite a long time, and that prevented the consolidation of a different policy. You had the Bill Clinton experience where he was moving against this apparatus in his second term. And now you have the Trump experience. You also had the LaRouche experience in the late 80s and 90s. Okay. None of this is unique. It's a pattern. It's not an anomaly. It's the way things have been working. It's essentially what Putin is alluding to. And the guts of U.S. politics is is the threat that an elected official or elected officials or a president elected will act independent of this apparatus. That is the guts of the U.S. political system right now. Okay. And what's happened to the population of the United States over these years is a certain disintegration of optimism in the future. It's marginalization of large parts of the population. It's the growth of these of this hatred for humanity and hatred for classical culture and in certain sections of the population. And you have people who are very popular among a certain layer, like Alex Jones. And Alex Jones is, you might say, an example of the emotions that he plays on, or of this kind of person, where China is the enemy, the globalists are running things, and you're the little guy, we have to get our guns together, we have to, you know, it's this mindset. And he has had LaRouche on his show, he's had Trump on his show, he's had different people on his show. But he exemplifies the kind of lack of culture, a lack of culture. And whenever LaRouche was on his show, he's always attacks his pessimism. He's always attacking Alex Jones' pessimism, because it's very pessimistic. It's almost as if he's expecting a civil war and everyone to get their guns out and, you know, what have you. Now, the population, so this is the kind of thing that you have in the United States. Now, so the guts, this is the guts of policies. Now, the core internal organ, which is at the center of all of this, and you don't hear about them until now, is the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. It is the FBI which is going to do the heavy lifting to prepare for Trump's impeachment or prepare for his assassination. The FBI has been involved in the assassinations of former presidents like Kennedy and former leaders like Martin Luther King. They were involved in the King assassination. So
and Malcolm X. And Malcolm X and Robert Kennedy.
Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X. Yeah. So an assassination is not simply going to come from some crazy person. The crazy person will be used to set up the assassination, but it's not necessarily going to come from. It's going to come from the FBI, or could come from the FBI. Now, so the Attorney General Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation. The Assistant Attorney General was appointed, Rosenstein. Then he advised Trump to fire Comey, which was, you know, it was going to happen anyhow. Then Mueller is appointed to be the special counsel, which is the equivalent of special prosecutor.
By Rosenstein.
Huh?
By Rosenstein.
By Rosenstein.
Yeah.
And then it's now being leaked that Mueller is now widening the investigation to obstruction of justice, centered around the firing of James Comey. Now, how does that work? Well, they don't have any evidence of collusion with Russia because there is none. But obstruction of justice is much more ambiguous. And it's how they're going to, it's the directionality they're going to go in. And what does this word mean, and what does that word mean, and what does this word mean, and what does that word mean? And that's the way they're going to, that's how they're going to go that route. However, Comey and Mueller are very, very close friends. Mueller was overseeing the entire operation to get LaRouche from the Justice Department before he became the FBI director. Mueller knows his stuff. This is nothing new to Mueller. So the FBI is at the center of this. And the collateral aspect of the FBI being at the center of this is that people are afraid of the FBI. People who are elected officials are afraid of the FBI. People in government are afraid of the FBI. And so forth. Because it's not just blackmail. It's not just scandals in the media, which are coordinated with the FBI. It's also assassinations. It's also frame-ups. People are afraid of the FBI. They have good reason to be afraid of the FBI. And so the FBI is now in the open going after Trump. In the open, not in the closet.
Yeah.
So the stakes are very high. So our mission is to go to the population and get them moving, because it's like a tinder box of straw. People are pissed. They see this being done to an elected president. But who is going to spark their rebellion? Not their. Who's going to spark them into action? Because Trump will not succeed in staying in office unless the population moves with him and unless he moves to implement a credit system. Because the other thing that's coming is the infrastructure crisis internally in the United States. The United States has reached a point in many aspects of its infrastructure that now breakdowns have begun. And there are two epicenters of a breakdown. One is in New York City, and the other is in Michigan, with the locks. Now,
With what?
it's called the zoo locks, the Sioux locks, and these are the locks that bring to the waterways from the upper.
Oh, yeah, the Sioux locks, yeah.
This brings
Oh, the
all
Sioux.
of the iron ore
Yeah.
into whatever's left of the industrial belt of the United States. There is no industrial belt left. There will be no industry in the Rust Belt if those locks shut down. It's that critical. They have to replace the locks, or they have to do something. And in the New York City case, they have to do something about the tunnels connecting New York and Manhattan and New Jersey. Those tunnels cannot be closed for repair because it would create a disaster. Similarly with Pennsylvania's railroad, Pennsylvania Station, which has 24 platforms, and they're running an incredible, they just can't shut any of those platforms down for repair. So our friend, Dr. Hal Cooper, has come forward with a proposal for them to bypass shutting down the platforms and on an emergency basis create a tunnel that connects a lot of the traffic, so it bypasses Pennsylvania and goes to Grand Central Station, where it is more capacity. Then there's a crisis of the subway system. And these things cannot be put off. And you're not going to deal with them by private-public partnerships. You have to go for an emergency on a mass scale. And not only that, but you're going to have to do this directly. And you cannot do it through the public, through the markets. Lincoln just found that out on the eve of the Civil War. When the Civil War was going, he went to the banks and wanted to borrow money, and they told him what the interest rate was going to be. And instead, he said, well, we're going to print our own money, our own debt. We're going to print our own debt and circulate it. It was called greenbacks. Well, you got to do the same thing now, because that is the emergency. It is an emergency that's coming. And so we're now involved in that. So the two things are, and the Glass-Steagall fight is also part of that, because you have to have Glass-Steagall in place. So all of these things are vectored in to the necessity that Trump has to act. But you can't let him do it. He's not going to do it alone. There has to be some other force coming in to catalyze a fight on these things. And so that's what we're doing. And so you have a battle shaping up inside the United States, and we have very clear on what we have to do. Putin seems to be very clear on what he has to do. The Chinese seem to be very clear on what they have to do. And we have to do it. And we have to crush the deep state in the United States. And you're not going to do it without activating the population. And that's the beginning of it. And not paradoxically, because of the strategic position of British Columbia in the Northwest, and in the future, strategic position of British Columbia, should the One Belt, One Road get extended through a Bering Strait tunnel, down through Alaska into Canada, and also the strategic relationship of British Columbia with respect to the future of water availability, either from the north or directly from Alaska. The strategic, not paradoxically, the strategic situation with British Columbia is now part of this fight. And you're seeing it reflected in the current political crisis in British Columbia. It is not a question of good guys versus bad guys. The Liberal Party is not the good guys. But it is a question of whether people want to survive, they want to have economic activity, or whether they want to go into a fantasy world of a utopian fantasy world that can never be. Or they want to be totally sidetracked into the politics that Ronnie was talking about. So that's where I'm going to stop. And